Here's our topic, the classification of matter. I'm sure this is very familiar with you since junior high school. You've been talking about matter, or since elementary, we've been dealing this topic in our science classes. So again, we're going to talk about this here in physical science. Matter. It is anything that occupies space or volume and has mass. An atom is the smallest particle of matter. So it is not the matter that is smallest. The particle that is smallest that composes a matter is an atom. Are those that can be observed or measured without changing the fixed composition of a substance, and it can be categorized. So the physical properties of matter are those that can be observed or measured without changing the fixed composition of a substance. So properties, kumbaga, the physical properties, and it can be categorized into intensive property and extensive property. So what are these uh, categorization of the physical property? So intensive, so ibig sabihin intense, from the word intense, di ba? Are properties that are not dependent on the amount of the substance. So kumbaga, kahit maliit man yan o marami, ganyan talaga yung kanyang number one na property. Later, we're going to have examples on these two categories. Second is extensive property. Properties that are dependent on the substance and change when the amount of the substance changes. So these are the examples of extensive and intensive properties. First, for intensive, we have the taste. Kahit gaano yung karami, kahit gaano yung kaliit, the taste will be the same. The color, kung green ba yan, green talaga yan. Kahit pa nabiak yan siya, it will stay the same. Hardness, boiling point, melting point, density, odor, and solubility. So, hindi ibig sabihin na marami siya, mas mabaho. Hindi ibig sabihin na maliit siya, mas hindi ganun mabaho. So, it will be the same. That's why it's intensive. For extensive, it will change. Kumbaga, magdepende sa dami niya na. The length, the volume, width, mass, weight, surface area, because it's extensive. Kumbaga yung kanyang panlabas na anyo. Andiyan na yung length. Kapag marami, syempre, o malaki, magbago talaga yung length. Volume, yung bigat niya, yung kanyang, at saka yung kanyang surface area. That's why it's extensive property. Changes in matter. So, matter would undergo in changes such as physical change or undergo chemical change. But what's the difference between the two? Physical change occurs when a substance changes its appearance without changing its composition. That's why it's physical. Because physically, makita mo agad yung kanyang pagbabago. For example, green siya nung original, and then when it change or it undergoes changes, it become pink or become red. So that's physical because its appearance change, but we're not changing its composition, of course. For chemical change is one that involves a change in the substance's chemical composition. That is, new substances are produced. It is also called chemical reaction. So for example, nung una liquid siya, tapos nag-undergo ng chemical change, it will chemically change, naging liquid, naging solid. Nung una red siya. Nung una ito na substance, una-una, ganyan yung substance niya from tawag niyan man, gas, tapos naging liquid. Ganon, nag-change, may chemical reaction. Hindi lang kumbaga physical. It changed into another substance. Okay, parang nahuli yun Next is pure substance. Something that cannot be broken down into simpler matter using physical methods. So there are two types of substances. We have elements and compounds. Elements are the simplest kind of pure substance. It is the simplest kind of pure substance. There are 110 elements, each made of a different type of atom and in the periodic table. Each element in the periodic table has a name and its particular symbol. For example, this H here is hydrogen, Li, lithium, Be, beryllium, Na, sodium, Mg, manganese, calcium, strontium, barium, radium, cesium, rutherfordium, rubidium. So these symbols has its corresponding name. Boron, aluminum, silicon, gallium, arsenic, copper, zinc, nickel, iron. So, meron yan silang corresponding names. It is best for you to familiarize these symbols of the element. I will include this in our quizzes or in our exam. So, please do familiarize the names and their symbol. You don't have to include the atomic number kasi napakarami hindi na yun kasali, okay? Just the, by the way, the designer of this periodic table is Dmitri Mendeleev. Its spelling is Dmitri, Dmitri Mendeleev, Mendeleev, but the Mendeleev is actually proper reading and pronunciation of that is Mendeleev. Mendeleev, as if there's an F, but there's no F in the spelling. So since it's English is dynamic, we can read that one as Mendeleev. It's okay. We don't have to be perfect. Okay, let's move on. Compounds are pure substances that are composed of multiple types of elements. Compound, from the word compound, means two or more elements are chemically bonded to one another. Compounds cannot be broken down by physical methods. They can be broken down by chemical reactions. So, walang physical na method na pwede mo siyang mapaghiwalay. Only can be possible na mapaghiwalay mo yan siya once na compound na or na chemically bond na through also chemical reactions. Have definite compositions with element ratios indicated by subscript OH2O. We call this building block the water molecule. Okay, so there's oxygen, one oxygen, two hydrogen. That's why H, two hydrogen, O, mono. So may one, automatic yan, may one dyan. That's why yan yung kanyang composition. Compounds. The properties of compounds are very different from the properties of elements that make them up. Caution: oxygen, no smoking, no open flames. They are very flammable. Yan sila yung mga compounds. And yan. Gaseous, yan. Mixtures. A mixture is something that can be broken down to simpler materials such using physical methods. There are three possible types of mixture. Number one, element plus another element. So you can mix an element and another element. Compound and another compound. You can mix a compound to a compound. Remember, compound is composed of two or more elements already that form another substance. So compound plus compound. Element, or number three, element and a compound. A single element and a composition of two or more elements, which is a compound. You can add this up. That could be a possible mixture. And There are categorizations. There are two main types of mixtures. We have homogeneous and heterogeneous mixture. For homogeneous mixture, the parts are distributed evenly. For example, salt water, syrup, air, and brass. You see, these are the ingredients. Homogeneous mixture of liquids are called solutions. When you mix one or more two types of liquids and you mix them properly, in, wherein you cannot easily separate the others when you mix it already, that's homogeneous mixture, and they are already called solutions. Homogeneous mixture of metallic atoms are called alloys. Okay. Example of heterogeneous. The second one is heterogeneous mixture. The parts are distributed unevenly. When we say unevenly, that means it cannot be thoroughly mixed, just like homogeneous. So for example, spaghetti and meatballs. It's very clear in the picture that if you want to separate the meatballs from the spaghetti, you can actually separate it. Unlike in homogeneous mixture, that if once they are mixed, for example, coffee and the water, you cannot separate easily the coffee from it. Water and oil, since oil will tend to go on the surface of the water, it can possibly be separated through some method. There's a method actually separating that. Matter flow chart. See, matter can be physically separated. Yes. And if it can be separated, it's a mixture. So if no, you cannot separate, it's a pure substance. Can it be chemically composed? If yes, a compound. No, an element. That's it. Metals and metalloids, those that you can see on the periodic table of elements. It is composed of metals and metalloids. For metals, its properties have high thermal conductivity. For metals, for example, we have nickel, copper, silver, gold, aluminum. Those are example of metals. And high thermal conductivity, ibig sabihin, kapag mainit at hinawakan mo, talagang nakakapasok. Mainit talaga siya. Mainit dun sa dulo, aabot yung init dun sa kabilang dulo. Have high electrical conductivity at the same time. Kapag grounded or may electricity, pag hinawakan mo, makokuryentehan ka. Metals are conductors, good conductors of electricity. That's why in most of our power lines, or even inside our inside the wires, we are using copper, since copper is cheap and abundant compared to silver or gold, which is very expensive. Reflect the light that strikes them, making them appear shiny. So metals are shiny when we know that. That's why gold, the most expensive, gold, silver, diamonds not metal, right? Right. I forgot. So the silver and the gold, it's shiny. Especially the gold, it's very expensive. We use it as an investment nowadays, and it's a beauty, you know. Can be rolled, flattened, or hammered into sheets because, for example, gold is soft. Malleable. Can be drawn into wires, solids at room temperature, and have high densities. Non-metals, on the other hand, does not conduct heat and electricity, just like rubber, right? Rubber cannot is a material that does not conduct electricity and heat. That's why ginagamit natin siya sa mga sandok or sa mga uh, yung mga kasirola sa bahay. Di ba yung sa handle niya, nakalagay doon, ang ginagamit madalasan is rubber. Because rubber does not conduct heat and electricity at the same time. have little luster and seldom reflect light, brittle, can be solid, liquid, or gas at room temperature, have low densities and melting points. Metalloids have property intermediate between metals and nonmetals, or most of these metalloids are semiconductors. Half-half, diba? It, it conducts partially to electricity. Okay, so that's it. Now for the last one, I have two questions. What's the answer? Which chemical elements do you think are the most abundant element on Earth? I really hope you can answer me in face to face. Of course, the most abundant element on Earth is the oxygen. It is the most abundant element in Earth's crust, waters, and atmosphere. It composes 49.5% of the total mass of these compounds. Also, silicon element is the second most abundant element. Silicon dioxide and silicates make up about 87% of the materials in the Earth's crust. What is the human body composed of? The adult human body contains the following elements. We have oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, phosphorus, and half kilo of other elements. Imagine that. Half kilo of other elements. 30 kilogram of oxygen. We have 8 kilogram of carbon and 4.5 kilogram of hydrogen and 1.4 kilogram of nitrogen, 0.9 kilogram of calcium, and 0.5 phosphorus. Those elements contain is our human body. So our human body is composed of those elements. You see, that's just trivia, right? I thought it was just water. There's oxygen, of course. Oxygen, carbon. We cannot live without these things, without these elements. It's impossible since it composes our human body. Okay, now, so that's it. Thank you for listening. You may browse to YouTube or search for more references if my discussion was quite vague for you, or you didn't satisfactorily understand the topic. You can actually search through the internet since we are online now. Make use of it. So there's YouTube, there's Google, there's Britannica, there's a lot of sources throughout the internet. Just don't use Facebook. Thank you.
I never made it.